Welcome to Scared Stories for a Rainy Night. As a reminder, before we begin, there are minimum ads in this entire video, so you can relax, sleep, and listen to the video without interruptions. I really hope you enjoy, and lastly, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you. My name is Alex Turner, and I'm a delivery driver. I spend my nights traversing the dimly lit streets of our small town, dropping off packages to houses that often feel like they belong in a different era. I've grown accustomed to the strange and sometimes eerie atmosphere that surrounds my job, but nothing could prepare me for the night of the last delivery. It was a chilly October evening, around 11 p.m., when I received a notification for a final drop-off. The address was unfamiliar, nestled at the edge of town, beyond the area I typically serviced. My curiosity piqued as I typed the coordinates into my GPS. It led me down an old gravel road, flanked by towering trees that seemed to lean in closer with every passing moment. As I drove deeper into the woods, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The air grew thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the crunch of gravel beneath my tires. Finally, I arrived at a dilapidated house that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. The paint was peeling, and the windows were boarded up save for one cracked pane that glimmered weakly in the moonlight. I hesitated, my heart pounding, but I couldn't just leave the package behind. It was my job. I stepped out of the car, the cold air biting at my skin, and approached the front door, which hung ajar, as if inviting me in. I knocked gently, but the sound echoed ominously into the darkness. No answer. I pushed the door open, and it creaked like a rusty hinge, sending a chill down my spine. The interior was even worse than I had imagined. Dust covered every surface, and the air smelled stale and musty. A single flickering light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "Delivery for a Mr. Harrington?" Silence enveloped me, thick and suffocating. I took a step inside, glancing around. The living room was filled with old furniture, covered in white sheets that resembled ghostly figures. A sense of dread washed over me, but I had to find Mr. Harrington. I moved deeper into the house, clutching the package tightly. As I made my way down a narrow hallway, I noticed a door at the end slightly ajar. The flickering light was stronger here, illuminating the edges of the door. With every step, an icy chill seeped into my bones. I pushed the door open, revealing a dimly lit room cluttered with old photographs. What struck me was the wall, completely covered in framed pictures of various people, all staring blankly at me. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized a familiar face, one of my childhood friends, Sarah, who had gone missing 5 years ago. My heart raced as I scanned the rest of the photographs, each featuring someone I knew, each person lost to the shadows of time. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me, a faint whisper like a breath against my ear. I spun around, but the hallway was empty. I felt a presence, something lurking just beyond my vision. Panic surged within me, and I ran back towards the exit. But the door slammed shut, trapping me inside. "Let me out!" I shouted, pounding against the wood. My heart raced as I struggled with the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. The whisper returned, louder now, a soft chant repeating, "Join us! Join us!" In a last-ditch effort, I turned back to the room filled with photographs. I grabbed the nearest one, Sarah's picture, and held it up, desperate for answers. "Where is Mr. Harrington?" I screamed, my voice cracking. The air grew heavy, and the shadows in the room began to swirl. I felt an overwhelming sense of despair as I realized that I wasn't alone. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and I stumbled back, nearly falling into the room. Standing there was an old man, his eyes sunken, his face a mask of sorrow. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," he said, his voice raspy. "They wanted to be remembered." Before I could process his words, I felt something cold wrapping around my ankles. I looked down to see shadows coiling around me, pulling me toward the photographs. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. In an instant, I was pulled into the very picture I held, the world around me fading away. Now, as I look out from the frame, I see Alex Turner's face flash on the screen of a YouTube video titled "Missing Person: The Haunting Case of Alex Turner." The irony isn't lost on me. I am now just another ghost in a photograph, waiting for the next unsuspecting delivery driver to stumble upon my story. Hey everyone, it's Jake. I'm 27 years old, and as you might know, I'm a freelance graphic designer. I spend a lot of time alone, but tonight I'm going to share something that still sends chills down my spine. Even a year later, it was a dark November evening, just after Halloween. The wind howled outside, and I was cozying up in my apartment, working on a project that had a tight deadline. The clock struck 9 p.m. as I settled in with a cup of coffee, my only source of warmth against the creeping cold. As I sat there, I noticed something odd. A chill ran down my spine, and I felt as if I was being watched. I shrugged it off, attributing it to the eerie atmosphere of the night. After all, my apartment had always been quiet. Perhaps too quiet. Suddenly, my phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a text from my buddy Mark. "Hey, you coming to the Halloween party tomorrow? You can't miss it?" I typed back a quick maybe and returned to my work. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to shift, dancing under the faint glow of my desk lamp. Time slipped away, and before I knew it, it was past midnight. I decided to take a break and made my way to the kitchen for a snack. That's when I heard it. A soft scratching sound coming from the front door. My heart raced. I wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly, I approached the door, peering through the peephole. Nothing. Just the dimly lit hallway outside. I hesitated, but the scratching continued, more insistent this time. Curiosity got the better of me, and I cautiously opened the door. At first, I didn't see anyone, but then I glanced down and saw a small, tattered doll lying on the welcome mat. It had button eyes and a twisted smile, its head slightly tilted as if it were looking at me. I felt an icy grip around my heart. Who would leave this here? I looked around, but the hallway was empty. I bent down to pick up the doll, and as my fingers brushed against its fabric, a sudden wave of unease washed over me. I quickly closed the door, heart pounding, and tossed the doll onto my couch. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread that had settled in my stomach, but as I went back to my work, the scratching noise returned. This time, it was louder, more frantic. I shot up from my chair, feeling the adrenaline course through my veins. I glanced at the clock. It was 12:15 a.m. "Is someone there?" I called out, my voice trembling. No response. The scratching continued, now accompanied by a soft whisper, almost like a child's giggle. My blood ran cold. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, illuminating the dark corners of the room. I crept toward the door again, but this time I didn't dare open it. Instead, I peered through the peephole once more, but this time I saw something that made my heart stop. A face. A pale, gaunt face with hollow eyes stared back at me, a twisted smile stretching across its lips. It was the doll, but now it was alive. My breath caught in my throat. I stumbled back, and the scratching turned into loud, frantic knocks. "Jake!" it called in a childlike voice. "Let me in!" I backed away, my hands trembling as I fumbled for my phone. I dialed 911, but the call wouldn't go through. The knocking turned to banging, shaking the door violently. "Let me in, Jake. I want to play." Suddenly, everything went quiet. I stood frozen, my mind racing. Had it all been in my head? Just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, I heard a whisper, soft but clear. "I'm already inside." The room grew cold, and I turned slowly, my eyes widening in horror. The doll was gone from the couch. Panic surged through me. I sprinted to the living room, searching frantically, but it was nowhere to be found. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A flash of movement in the reflection of the window. I turned, and there it was, standing in the shadows, its button eyes glinting in the dim light. I screamed and bolted toward the hallway, but the door slammed shut behind me. I was trapped. The doll giggled again, its voice echoing in the silence. "You shouldn't have let me in, Jake." And then I remembered, the doll hadn't just come from the outside. It had been in the apartment all along, hidden in the corner of my closet, where I had placed it months ago after finding it at a thrift store. I had thought it was just a creepy decoration, but now it was something much worse. I turned to face it, ready to confront whatever nightmare I had unleashed. But as I did, everything went black, the world fading away into nothingness. So here I am, sharing this story with you, hoping that if you ever find a doll, you'll throw it away and never look back. Because sometimes the things we think are just toys are far from innocent. And remember, some doors are best left closed. I've always enjoyed the quiet solitude of my home office, especially during long nights when I could let my creativity flow without interruption. But this particular night, I felt an unsettling chill in the air, like an invisible presence hovering just beyond my line of sight. It was 11:47 p.m. on a chilly October night, and I was deep into a project that had been consuming my thoughts for weeks. The soft glow of my computer screen illuminated the room, casting eerie shadows on the walls, which seemed to sway like dark, looming figures. I had told myself countless times that I loved working late at night, but tonight was different. As I continued to click away at my keyboard, I heard a faint sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was a whisper, soft, almost melodic, but laced with an underlying menace. I paused, straining to listen, but all I could hear was the relentless hum of my computer. I shook my head, convincing myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as I returned to my work, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Alex? Alex?" The voice seemed to echo through the walls, wrapping around me like a shroud. I glanced at the clock. 11:55 p.m. I was alone in the house. I had made sure of it before getting settled. My heart raced as I stood up, scanning the room for any sign of movement. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. No response. Just the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I tried to dismiss the feeling of dread that had settled in my gut, but it clung to me like a shadow, dark and oppressive. I returned to my desk and forced myself to focus on the screen, but the whispers continued, weaving in and out of my thoughts. "Help us! Help us!" They beckoned, pulling me further into their sinister grip. I felt cold sweat trickling down my spine as I suddenly remembered the old house I had moved into. It had a history, a tragic one. A family had vanished without a trace years ago, leaving nothing but unanswered questions and a lingering sense of despair. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts, but the whispers persisted, growing louder, more desperate. I grabbed my phone, thinking I could call a friend, but the screen flickered and then went dark. Panic surged through me. The power had never gone out before. I rushed to the window, hoping to see the comforting glow of streetlights, but outside was nothing but darkness. With my heart racing, I stumbled back to my desk and grabbed a flashlight from the drawer. As I flicked it on, the beam illuminated the corners of my room, revealing the familiar contours of furniture, but the shadows seemed to move, shifting in ways that defied logic. The whispers crescendoed into a cacophony. "Join us. Join us." Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, silence enveloped the room. The flickering light of my computer returned, and the whispers faded into an eerie stillness. I felt a twinge of relief, but it was short-lived. The clock on my desk read 12:01 a.m. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart, when something caught my eye in the corner of the room. A figure stood there, barely illuminated by the flashlight. It was a pale silhouette, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. I froze, unable to move as the figure began to step closer. "Help us," it whispered again, but this time it sounded like a plea, laced with desperation. Suddenly, the figure lunged at me, and I stumbled back, tripping over my chair. I hit the floor hard, the flashlight skidding out of my hand and plunging me into darkness once more. My heart raced as I scrambled to get up, but it was too late. The figure was upon me, enveloping me in a suffocating darkness. And just as I thought it was the end, the world around me shifted. I was no longer in my office. I was in a dimly lit room filled with old photographs of a family that looked just like me and my parents. I was staring at my own face, trapped in time, but older and wearier, as though I had been living this moment over and over again. The whispers returned, but now they were filled with a sorrowful understanding. "Join us. You've always been one of us." In that moment, the chilling truth dawned on me. I had never been alone in this house. The whispers had never been a threat. They were a call, a reminder of my own history and the cycle that had ensnared me. I realized that I was not just a victim of the past, but a part of it, destined to repeat the same fate as the family who had once lived here. As I succumbed to the shadows, I could feel the whispering voices welcoming me home. My name is Eric Thompson. I work as a freelance writer. I've spent countless nights staring at my computer screen, crafting stories that often tread the line between reality and fiction. But what I'm about to share is not a product of my imagination. It's a chilling account of what happened to me just last month in my old creaky apartment. It was a stormy Saturday night in April around 11 p.m. when I returned home from a late-night coffee run. The rain pounded against my window like a frantic drummer, and the wind howled, sending shivers down my spine. My apartment, a dilapidated unit on the third floor of a century-old building, creaked and groaned with every gust of wind. I had grown used to its eerie sounds, but that night felt different. As I settled into my worn-out sofa, sipping my coffee and scrolling through my laptop, a strange whisper broke through the symphony of the storm. At first, I dismissed it as the wind, but the voice was distinct, almost pleading. "Help me!" I froze. My heart raced as I glanced around my dimly lit living room, the shadows dancing across the walls. Surely I was just tired? I shook it off and tried to focus on my writing, but the whisper came again, clearer this time. "Help me." I stood up, my pulse quickening, and walked toward the source of the sound. It seemed to come from the walls, as if someone, or something, was trapped behind them. I pressed my ear against the cold, damp plaster. The whisper faded, replaced by a faint scratching, like nails clawing against wood. I could feel bile rising in my throat. I knew the building had a dark history. Previous tenants had spoken of mysterious occurrences, but I had never experienced anything quite like this. I grabbed my phone and recorded everything, my shaky voice capturing the essence of my fear. "Is anyone there?" I called out, half hoping for a response, half dreading it. The scratching intensified, and my curiosity overwhelmed my fear. I grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the small closet in my hallway, where I felt the sound was coming from. As I shined the beam into the dark space, I noticed a small, rotted panel at the back wall. It was slightly ajar, as if begging to be opened. With trembling hands, I pried it open, revealing a narrow passageway that seemed to stretch into darkness. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a tempest. "Help me, please." I squeezed through the opening, the damp air swirling around me as I crawled into the narrow space. The walls were lined with old peeling newspapers and forgotten memories. As I ventured deeper, my flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. Then I saw it. At the end of the passageway stood a figure, shrouded in darkness, with hollow eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. "You came," it rasped, its voice a hollow echo. "I need your help." Before I could respond, the figure lunged at me, its cold fingers brushing against my arm. I screamed, scrambling backward until I fell back into the closet. The figure vanished, leaving only the whispers behind. Panicked, I hurried back to my living room, shutting the closet door tightly. Heart racing, I tried to rationalize what had just happened. It was just my mind playing tricks on me, right? But as the storm raged on outside, the whispers returned, more insistent than before. "Help me. I can't escape." I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to leave. I threw on a jacket and grabbed my phone, ready to flee into the night. But just as I reached for the door, I paused. The voice had changed. It was softer, more familiar. It now sounded like me. "Help me. Please." I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. There, in the darkened corner of my living room, was my reflection in the window, staring back at me with an expression I did not recognize. My lips moved, but it wasn't my voice that came out. "You can't leave. You belong here now." The realization hit me like a thunderstorm. I had unwittingly opened a door to a world I could never escape. I was now a part of the whispers, forever trapped in my own haunted story. As I stood there, frozen in fear, the storm raged on, an eternal reminder that some stories are not meant to be written, but lived. I'm a 28-year-old night security guard at an old, abandoned hospital on the outskirts of town. It's a place that has seen better days, filled with peeling paint, broken windows, and the lingering scent of decay. I took this job to pay off my student loans, but I quickly learned that the nights here are anything but peaceful. It was a chilly Saturday night, August 31st, 2024, and the clock struck midnight. The only sounds were the distant rustling of leaves outside and the occasional creak of the building settling. I sat at my desk, scrolling through my phone, trying to keep my mind occupied. The hospital had been closed for years, but rumors of hauntings and strange occurrences kept people away. I had always been skeptical of such tales, until tonight. As I made my rounds, flashlight in hand, I felt a chill run down my spine. The air grew heavy, and I could swear I heard faint whispers echoing through the empty halls. I paused, straining to listen, but the sounds faded away, leaving only the sound of my own heartbeat. I shook my head, attributing it to my imagination. After all, it was just an old building. I continued my patrol, passing by the old maternity ward. The door creaked open slightly, and I felt an inexplicable urge to step inside. The room was dark, the moonlight barely illuminating the dust-covered furniture. As I entered, the whispers returned, clearer this time. They seemed to be coming from the corner of the room. I aimed my flashlight toward the sound, but there was nothing there, just shadows dancing on the walls. Feeling unnerved, I decided to leave, but as I turned, the door slammed shut behind me. Panic surged through me. I rattled the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, now sounding like desperate cries. "Help us! Help us!" they pleaded. I pressed my ear against the door, trying to make sense of what was happening. Suddenly, the whispers stopped, and an eerie silence enveloped the room. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "It's just the wind," I muttered, though I didn't believe it. I stepped back, ready to kick the door down if necessary, when I noticed something on the floor. A small, dusty teddy bear. It looked out of place, as if it had been left behind by a child long ago. I picked it up, feeling a strange warmth radiating from it. As I held it, the whispers returned, now more frantic. "Find us! Find us!" I dropped the bear in shock, and it rolled across the floor, stopping at the wall. I approached it cautiously, and as I did, I noticed a faint outline of a door hidden behind the peeling wallpaper. With trembling hands, I peeled back the wallpaper, revealing a small door. My heart raced as I opened it, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The whispers intensified, urging me to descend. Against my better judgment, I stepped inside, the door creaking ominously behind me. The stairs spiraled down into a cold, damp basement. As I reached the bottom, I was met with a dimly lit room filled with old toys and crumbling furniture. In the center stood a group of shadowy figures, their faces obscured, but their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. They were children, lost souls trapped in this forsaken place. "Help us!" they chorused, their voices echoing in my mind. I felt a wave of sorrow wash over me. "What happened to you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "We were forgotten," one of them replied, stepping forward. "Left behind when the hospital closed. We need to be found." Suddenly the room began to shake, and the shadows swirled around me. I stumbled back, realizing too late that I had become part of their story. The whispers grew louder, drowning out my thoughts. "You will stay with us," they chanted, their voices merging into a haunting melody. In a final desperate attempt, I turned to flee, but the shadows enveloped me, pulling me into their world. I felt myself fading, my memories slipping away. As darkness consumed me, I heard one last whisper, "Now you are one of us." The next morning, the sun rose over the abandoned hospital, casting long shadows across the ground. A new security guard arrived for their shift, unaware of the fate that awaited them. As they stepped inside, the whispers began anew, echoing through the halls, calling out for help. And in the corner of the maternity ward, a dusty teddy bear lay forgotten, waiting for the next soul to find it. My name is Sarah. I work as a freelance graphic designer. It's late, around 2 a.m., and I'm sitting in my small apartment trying to shake off the feeling that something isn't right. I thought I'd share a story that happened to me a few weeks ago. It still gives me chills. It all started on a stormy night, much like tonight. The rain was lashing against my window, and the wind howled like a restless spirit. I was in the middle of an intense project for a client when I heard a strange noise. It came from the attic, an odd thumping sound. like something heavy being dragged across the floor. At first, I dismissed it as the old pipes settling or the wind playing tricks on my mind. But as the noise continued, intermittent and rhythmic, it gnawed at my focus. I tried to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my phone for light and made my way to the attic door, which was tucked away at the end of a narrow hallway. The door creaked ominously as I opened it, revealing a dark staircase leading up into the shadows. The air was thick with dust and a musty smell that made me cough. I hesitated, a chill creeping down my spine, but I couldn't turn back now. As I climbed the stairs, the thumping grew louder and more frantic. My heart raced, and I felt a cold sweat forming on my brow. At the top, I pushed open the attic door, and what I saw made my breath catch in my throat. The attic was filled with boxes and old furniture covered in sheets, but in the corner there was a large old trunk. It was moving slightly, as if something inside was trying to get out. I stepped closer, my hands trembling as I reached for the latch. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. The thumping stopped abruptly. Silence enveloped me, heavy and oppressive. I could feel a presence, something watching me from the shadows. With a deep breath, I opened the trunk. Inside was a tangle of old clothes and an unsettling array of mirrors, reflecting my frightened face back at me. But then I noticed something else. A small tattered diary lying on top of the clothes. I picked it up, and as I flipped through the pages, I realized it belonged to a woman named Clara, who had lived in my apartment decades ago. The entries were filled with her thoughts, her dreams, and then her fears. She wrote about hearing voices at night and seeing shadows moving in the corners of her vision. The last entry sent chills down my spine. I think I'm not alone anymore. The shadows are getting closer. Suddenly, I felt a cold breeze brush past me, and the attic door slammed shut. Panic surged through me. I rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. The shadows around me thickened, and I could hear faint whispers echoing through the room, a chorus of voices weaving in and out of my consciousness. "Let me out!" I screamed, banging on the door. The whispers grew louder, merging into a deafening roar. I turned back to the trunk, realizing Clara's diary was the key to understanding what was happening. I read aloud from the last entry, hoping to summon whatever forces had taken hold of this place. As I spoke, the shadows seemed to swirl around me, forming a dark figure that loomed closer. I could feel its icy breath on my neck. In a desperate attempt, I yelled, "I'm not afraid of you!" The figure hesitated, and in that moment, I noticed something. Its face, twisted and dark, bore a strange resemblance to mine. With a jolt, I realized the truth. Clara hadn't just been haunted, she had been trapped in that trunk, her spirit intertwined with mine. The shadows were not just echoes of her fears, they were remnants of her soul, desperately trying to escape. Just then, the door flew open and I stumbled back, the diary falling from my hands. The figure dissipated into a whirlwind of darkness, leaving me gasping for breath. I scrambled down the stairs, the attic door slamming shut behind me. Now I sit here, sharing this story with you, but I can't shake the feeling that Clara is still with me. Sometimes, late at night, I can see her face in the mirrors around my apartment, her eyes pleading for release. So, if you're ever in an old building and you hear strange noises, just remember, sometimes the shadows hold secrets that are better left undisturbed. It's Alex, and today I want to share something truly chilling that happened to me not too long ago. I'm a freelancer. Typically, I'm not one to believe in the supernatural. but what I experienced that night shook me to my core. It was a stormy Thursday evening, around 11 p.m., when the rain poured down like 1,000 tiny needles against my window. I had spent the day working on a project that was due the next morning. The deadlines can be brutal in my line of work, so I often work late into the night. As I sat there, the only sounds were the tapping of rain and the occasional rumble of thunder. I was deep in concentration when I heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible, but distinct enough to send chills down my spine. At first, I brushed it off as the wind. You know how it is? Your mind plays tricks on you when you're tired. But then, it happened again. This time, it was clearer, as if someone was standing right behind me. "Alex!" the voice called, a gentle yet eerie tone that sent a shiver through me. I turned around, half expecting to see someone there, but my small apartment was empty. Just me, my laptop, and the flickering candle. Feeling uneasy, I decided to take a break. I stepped into the kitchen, grabbing a glass of water, my heart racing. As I leaned against the countertop, trying to shake off the feeling, I heard the whisper again. "Alex." It was closer this time. Panic surged through me. I dropped the glass, shattering it on the floor. I was alone. I had to be. I rushed back to my living room, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadows danced on the walls as the candle flickered, and I felt a cold breeze sweep through the room, even though all the windows were shut tight. I wanted to call someone, but who would I call at this hour? Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something. A shadow darted across the wall, moving too quickly for me to make sense of it. I felt my breath hitch in my throat. "This can't be happening," I muttered to myself. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "It's just your imagination, Alex. Just finish the project and go to bed." But as I sat back down, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Alex, help me!" The voice was filled with desperation. I froze. I could barely think. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was rooted to my chair. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. My laptop screen illuminated my face in a ghostly glow, but it was hardly comforting. I fumbled for my phone, praying for a light, when I felt a sudden weight on my shoulders, like a cold hand gripping me. I gasped, my heart racing as I turned around again, but there was nothing there. "Please, help me," the voice pleaded again, echoing in my mind. I felt a surge of determination. I would not let whatever this was frighten me any longer. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it around the room. The beam danced over the walls, but there was no one, just shadows. That's when I noticed something strange. The shadows were moving, not just flickering. They seemed to form shapes, twisting and contorting as if trying to break free from the darkness. My breath caught in my throat as I realized they were forming a figure, a woman, her face obscured, but I could feel her sorrow. "Help me, Alex," she whispered again, and my heart sank. I recognized that voice. It was my younger sister, Lily. She had disappeared years ago, her case never solved. I had spent countless nights searching for answers, but here she was, reaching out from beyond. "Lily?" I whimpered, tears streaming down my face. "Is it really you?" "I need you to find me," she urged, her voice growing fainter. The figure dissolved into the shadows, leaving only the echo of her plea. I felt a mix of relief and confusion. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. The storm outside raged on, but now it felt like a distant memory. I turned back to my laptop, my fingers flying over the keyboard as I searched for any clues about her disappearance. After hours of digging, I found a name, someone who had been involved in her case. I jotted it down, adrenaline coursing through me. I had to call the police in the morning. But as I closed my laptop, a sudden calm washed over me. The whispers had stopped, the shadows receded, and the air felt warmer. Maybe this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I could finally find peace for Lily. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a sense of hope. But just as I was about to drift off, I heard it again. "Alex?" I bolted upright, heart thundering in my chest. It wasn't Lily's voice. It was a deeper, darker tone that sent icy fingers crawling down my spine. "Help me find her." And that's when I realized the shadows weren't just connected to Lily. They were after me too. So, what do you think? Is it just a figment of my imagination, or is there something more sinister lurking in the shadows? I work as a freelancer from my tiny apartment on the outskirts of the city. It's a cozy space, filled with my sketches and a myriad of half-finished projects. I've always enjoyed the quiet solitude of my home, especially late at night, when the world outside fades into a distant hum. It was a chilly October evening, just after midnight, when I decided to dive into a new design project. The soft glow of my computer screen illuminated the dark room, casting long shadows that danced eerily against the walls. I was alone, just the way I liked it. The perfect atmosphere for creativity. As I clicked away, headphones snugly placed on my ears, I began to hear a faint whispering. It was soft at first, like the rustling of leaves outside my window. I shrugged it off, attributing it to the wind. But as I continued to work, the whispering grew louder, more distinct. "Mia, Mia." My heart raced. I pulled off my headphones and listened intently. The whispers seemed to come from the corner of my apartment, a dark space that I rarely ventured into. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but the chill creeping down my spine said otherwise. "Just the wind," I muttered under my breath, trying to shake off the feeling of dread. I resumed working, but the whispers persisted, echoing through my mind, pulling me toward that shadowy corner. I could no longer concentrate on my designs. So, with my heart pounding, I decided to investigate. I stood up, my feet hesitating as I approached the darkness. As I neared, the whispers intensified, wrapping around me like a cold fog. "Mia, come closer." I squinted into the shadows, trying to discern what was lurking there. Suddenly, the air felt heavy, thick with an unexplainable presence. I could hear my own breath, shallow and quick, as the whispers turned into soft laughter that echoed around me. With a surge of courage, I flicked on the light switch. The room brightened, revealing nothing but the empty space filled with old boxes and cobwebs. Confused and slightly relieved, I laughed nervously at my own fear. Maybe I was just overtired. I turned back to my desk, shaking off the eerie feeling, but the whispers didn't stop. "Mia, you're not alone." I froze. The voice was clearer now, resonating deep within my mind. Panic surged through me. I turned around swiftly, scanning the room for any signs of intrusion, but there was nothing. Just shadows taunting me. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted from the kitchen, causing me to jump. I rushed to the doorway, my heart racing again. I peeked around the corner, and my breath caught in my throat. The kitchen window was wide open, swinging back and forth in the wind. I distinctly remembered closing it earlier, but the whispers grew louder, almost mocking me. "Mia, let us in?" I slammed the window shut, my hands trembling. I turned back to the living room, desperate to find comfort in my familiar space. But then I noticed something chilling, a figure standing in the corner, cloaked in darkness. its features obscured. My heart dropped, and I stumbled backward. "Mia, you've been so lonely." It stepped forward, revealing a gaunt, pale face with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through me. Fear rooted me to the spot. As it came closer, I felt an overwhelming sense of despair wash over me. "What do you want?" I managed to gasp. The figure only smiled, its lips curling in a sinister grin. "You called us. You wanted company." And then it hit me. The whispered conversations I'd been having with myself while working late at night. The longing for connection during those solitary hours. I had invited this darkness into my life, yearning for something more than my solitary existence. Just as I was about to scream, the figure dissolved into the shadows, leaving behind a whisper that echoed in my mind, "Now you'll never be alone." The next morning, I awoke at my desk, my computer still glowing with the remnants of my work. The whispers had faded, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I looked around my apartment, hoping it was all a nightmare, yet deep down, I knew the truth. In that moment, I understood that the loneliness I had embraced had summoned something beyond my understanding. I would never be alone again, but I could never escape the shadows I had invited into my life. From then on, every night I'd hear the whispers, soft and inviting, reminding me that sometimes the company we crave can lead to the most terrifying of consequences. My name is Liam, and I'm a security guard working the graveyard shift at an old office building downtown. It's a boring job, but it pays the bills while I'm taking classes during the day. Usually, the nights are uneventful. Just me, the gentle hum of the fluorescent lights, and the occasional mouse skittering across the linoleum floors. But tonight feels different somehow. An eerie stillness hangs in the air, like the building itself is holding its breath. As I make my rounds, checking that doors are locked and everything is in its place, I can't shake the prickling sensation on the back of my neck, as if unseen eyes are watching my every move. Around 2 a.m., as I'm checking the top floor, I freeze at a sudden sound behind me. The unmistakable creak of a door opening. Heart pounding, I spin around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. But the hallway is empty. I must be imagining things. Then I hear it again. A door slowly opening at the far end of the hall. My mouth goes dry as I approach, one hand on the radio at my belt, ready to call for backup. I ease the door open with a trembling hand. Inside, the room is pitch black, the air heavy and thick. I sweep my light across the abandoned desks and chairs, and that's when I see it. In the far corner, illuminated in the flashlight's glow, is my own body, slumped lifeless on the floor, a pool of blood spreading beneath me. I blink and it's gone, just an empty corner in an empty room. My head spins as I stagger backward. What the hell is happening? Am I losing my mind? I need to get out of here? I turn to leave and my heart nearly stops. There, standing in the doorway, is a shadowy figure. I open my mouth to yell, but no sound comes out. The figure takes a step forward and I see its face. It's me. Or rather, it looks like me, but the features are all wrong. The skin too pale, the eyes black and hollow. The other me smiles, a slow, eerie grin that makes my blood run cold. It's time, it rasps in a voice that sounds like dead leaves skittering across a grave. Time to join us. I've heard stories about this place, rumors that it's built on the site of an old cemetery, that the souls of the restless dead still roam these halls. I always dismissed them as urban legends, but now, as the doppelganger reaches for me with bone-white hands, I know the truth. And it's the last thing I ever learn, as my screams echo through the abandoned halls, unheard. I am software developer. It was around 11:30 p.m. on a stormy October night last year. I had just moved into a small, old house on the outskirts of town. The place gave me the creeps from the moment I stepped inside, but the price was too good to pass up for my first home. That night, the wind howled and rain pounded the thin walls as I tried to fall asleep in my new bedroom. Suddenly, I heard a faint scratching sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It seemed to be coming from inside the walls, moving all around the room. Mice, I thought, pulling the covers tighter. I'd have to set some traps in the morning. The scratching continued, growing louder and more frantic. It sounded bigger than mice. Rats, maybe? I sat up in bed, my heart racing. The scratching turned to scuffling, thumping, seeming to come from everywhere at once, circling the room. I jumped up and turned on the light. The noises stopped. I didn't sleep much that night. In the light of morning, I inspected the baseboards for holes, but found nothing. No droppings, either. Figuring it was just rodents in the walls, I left for work. That evening, the scratching returned, more aggressive than before. I put my ear to the wall. The sounds were too big to be rats. It sounded almost human, like fingernails clawing to get out. I recoiled in horror. I called the police, feeling foolish but fearing the worst. 2 officers came to investigate. One of them chuckled. "Sounds like you got a scratching Tom." "A what?" I asked. Shone his flashlight around the room. This is an old house. Probably someone trapped in these walls decades ago. Body never found. Now he haunts new owners, trying to claw his way out and get revenge. But don't worry, it's just a ghost story. The officers left, laughing it off. But the scratching continued every night, wearing on my nerves. Desperate, I bought a sledgehammer, determined to break open the walls and confront my tormentor. That fateful night, I bashed a hole in the wall where the scratching was loudest. As plaster crumbled away, I saw a flash of white. Bones. A skeleton. Its fingertips, worn to nubs, fell out of the wall. Scratches covered the inside of its tomb. A desperate, failed attempt to escape. I stumbled back, in shock. Then I noticed something, clutched in the skeleton's other hand. A scrap of paper. I pried it loose with trembling fingers and unfolded it. Written in faded ink was a single sentence. I hid from a killer, but no one could hear me. As I looked up from the note, I heard a creak on the floorboards behind me. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the scratching had stopped.